Hey Ryan,
Hey Priscilla, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, doing good.
Good.
Up in your classroom?
Yeah, I'm down here at school. It's just easier for me.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's cool.
I know, and it's all been sanitized. It's pretty nice and quiet down here.
Okay, well, that's good. And are there many other people there today?
Um, there's always a couple people down at the office. I think I saw two or three other teachers.
Okay.
Janitors are still working around the building.
Wow. Yeah, sure. Of
Yeah.
course. Cool. How's everything been going for you? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. How's the online stuff been going with your students? Have they been working or not? Or
I think I've got assignments from about 36 students from 8th grade. I have
okay.
about 85. So
So
that's
about
50 kids that haven't even started.
yeah.
So we'll see. I think there's a case to be made to do this work even if it doesn't affect your grade, just
Right.
because it helps you practice this new way of learning. It gives me an opportunity to figure out the feedback.
Right.
Parents and students can figure out what works and what doesn't.
Right.
So like this Andrew Jackson essay,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard back from a lot of students that watching the whole movie, which is an hour and a half, and doing all of the reading, which is almost all of chapter 12, that's a lot of work
That is a lot of work to do.
in one
Right.
day.
Yeah, that's a lot to do.
It is a lot to do.
It
So
is.
that's why I thought if I could talk with one of you guys, we could
Sure.
kind of review Andrew Jackson and discuss kind
Sure.
of issues. And while
Yeah.
we're talking, I'm going to work on a thinking map that I'll just add to this recorded conversation online, and then students
Okay.
listen and they can look at this and see if that helps them
Okay.
at all. We'll see.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, I'm going to make a column for pro Jackson and anti
Okay.
Jackson.
Sure.
I know he's one of those really divisive presidents.
He is. He's one of these people that, you can look at him and there's a legit debate over the good and the bad about him. Like things he did during his presidency that you could say were probably good, and things that you could say were most definitely like reprehensible and probably should be condemned. So I think
Yeah.
there's definitely both. So
I know. And he's one of those few presidents that has, even now, there's a following with him, just like with
yeah.
Trump. You love him or you hate him. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and there's certainly some parallels, and we've kind of talked about that too between our current president and him in terms of having a sort of like populist kind of like message to the people and that sort of thing. But there's certainly a lot of differences, I think, between
well, yeah,
between the two as well. They have very, very different backgrounds
yeah,
and very different. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Very different backgrounds. So,
yeah. Well, if we look at the pro Jackson stuff,
huh?
he was really intelligent,
Sure, he
really
was. Yeah.
intelligent, super hardworking,
Yep.
and you see him rise to popularity with the Battle of New Orleans.
You do. So I think, yeah, I mean, the pro Jackson stuff is that, I mean, he is a self-made man. There's no doubt he was born into poverty. I mean, he was orphaned at an early age. I mean, he had to fight for, himself. He basically gave
Right.
himself an education. He went and got a law degree, became a lawyer, rose up pretty quickly um, through his sort of like education and then becoming a lawyer,
Yeah,
and then sort of moving into like, what was he, like a county, not like a county attorney, but kind of like that.
yeah, he had like a local position of authority. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 In Tennessee. Right. And then, I mean, it wasn't a short time after that that he was general of like the Tennessee militia, which
yeah,
was like, it was like the thing that's tasked with protecting people there.
right.
And then he was basically just said, hey, that kind of got sucked into the army, and he kind of just got command of that southern half of the army, which
Yeah.
ended up, Battle of New Orleans, like you said. So,
Yeah, and of his men, I mean, there were a lot of men that served with him.
mm-hmm.
They loved him because he was a great leader. He was
Was.
capable of making those split-second decisions. He won against tremendous odds. I mean, didn't he had like what 400 soldiers or something, and he beat thousands in the
I
Battle of
think it's probably, yeah, I think it's probably a little bit more than that, but yeah, certainly the odds at New Orleans were certainly way against him. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no doubt about it that, and if you were to put your money on anybody, you said the British should have won there. I mean, they'd
yeah.
already been fighting. I mean, they'd fought Napoleon. This is the same army that had just got done beating Napoleon, and like, yeah, I mean, all odds would have said he has this ragtag group of people, limited supplies, but they dug in and also I think the British were foolish for attacking when they probably shouldn't have, but
Well, yeah.
that's the way it works. So
It is the way it works. And you can look back at that time period and think, wow, communication lines were really nothing like today because
right,
the treaty had already been signed by the time the battle was fought.
but they didn't know that, right?
They didn't know
That's,
it
that
because
was,
they hadn't
that,
gotten the message.
no, I mean the treaty had been signed 2 weeks before the Battle of New Orleans. Nobody knew about it though, as far as both Jackson knew and as far as both the British soldiers there knew. War was still on, and they needed to fight. And honestly, there is some debate on whether had Jackson lost there and the British captured New Orleans and controlled the access to the Mississippi River, who knows? Maybe the British would have, maybe they would have tore up part of the Treaty of Ghent and said, no, we still want to have access to the Mississippi River. Who knows?
I mean, at that
Yeah,
time, the Mississippi River was the biggest highway in our nation. There was
totally.
traffic going up and down. That was the future, everybody moving west.
Yep.
So for Andrew Jackson to come from an orphan, growing up in poverty, to teach himself, become a local leader, then start leading the militia, get put in charge of all of the military in this area of the nation,
Yep.
defeat the British at this massive battle, and successfully win control of the whole Mississippi River Valley.
Yep.
You just got to admire a guy like that.
Well, and
A lot of
I
good
think
stuff.
the men that fought with, I mean, that's where he gets his nickname, Old Hickory.
Yeah.
That name came from the soldiers that served with him because they thought he was tough, and I think he genuinely cared about like the soldiers that were under his command. I think that's true too. So
Yeah.
no, I mean, I don't. Jackson was a guy who commanded people's respect. People respected him. I think he was a good leader, and I don't think there's any question about that. Even beyond the Battle of New Orleans, I mean, he goes over and he basically, it's a wink and a nod from President Monroe to go and take Spain from Florida. Whether or not he actually gets that authority from Monroe, who knows? But he does. He goes in and he basically kicks the Spanish out of Florida, takes over Florida for the United States, and he himself moves into Tallahassee and sets up basically a territorial government there within a month or two. So, you can argue about the legality of all that happened, but the fact is he went in military force, kicked the Spanish out, set up a territorial government in Tallahassee, and there you go. Florida's part of the United States.
I know. No wonder he was so popular. He gets the Mississippi River. He gets Florida. I mean, it's almost single-handedly, this guy adds a lot of territory and a lot of power to our country.
You could say that about maybe New Orleans. I mean, certainly Florida he gets credit for. I think the New Orleans stuff is maybe a little bit blown out of proportion. I think he certainly uses New Orleans he's the hero of New Orleans, right? He's like, a lot of people think about him as like the second George Washington, but
yeah,
is that really true?
Like a myth and a legend.
Yeah, right. But he's more than happy to use that story, right, to propel him to use it for his political career, which politicians still do today, right? Of course they do. They still use stories today.
Right? I know. I uploaded a link to Jimmy Horton singing "The Battle of New Orleans." Fired our guns and the British kept a coming. Wasn't that? That song?
And that's true.
I learned that as a kid. I learned it as a kid. The legend of Andrew Jackson getting this battle. Yeah.
And I think I would guess that some of that is probably what led to him being on our currency. Is I think there's some like legend or kind of maybe mythology around him. He's kind of like this larger than life figure. Mm-hmm. Like kind of at that time in history, kind of probably like Washington probably was too, in like the 1780s and 1790s, but so.
Yeah. So there you go. You got anything else nice to say about this guy?
He paid off the national debt.
Wow. Wow.
So,
I didn't actually remember that. He paid off the whole national debt?
That we have zero national debt while he's president.
Wow.
So, I mean, you got to give him credit for that too. He mostly sells off a lot of, federal lands to the west, but it's the only time in our history in the 1830s. That's the only time we have zero national debt. So when you're today, we
Wow.
have $22 trillion national debt. So, and if the stimulus
Wow.
package goes through Congress here, tack on 2 trillion more here to it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So,
no, I started running the numbers of that with my son. I know this is off topic, but
yeah.
he's like, okay, if you look up how many citizens there are that are over the age of 18 and you
Mhm.
give each of them $1,200 and then you try to guesstimate who else would get 800 for, later and then the 500 per kid,
Right.
that leaves more than $1 trillion unaccounted for. So where's the rest of the money going?
Well, they have a cutoff. There's like a cutoff. I think so. Married couples filing that earn 150 or more don't get any money, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's 75,000 is the cutoff for individual filing. So not everybody's going to get money, but most Americans probably are. So
Yeah.
if you think about tax-paying adults, working adults, 18 to 65,
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So what are they doing with the other trillions? I
I
mean,
have no idea. Haven't looked at it. We'll find out. But
uh,
yeah, I mean, speaking
yeah,
of
but
national debt, but
gosh, that just sounds like a fantasy to live in a nation where there's no national debt. Yeah.
we haven't lived in that country since the 1830s. So,
Wow.
yep,
All right. There's just as many people who are really against Jackson. They just
sure,
can't stand this guy.
sure.
And a lot of this stems from the things that he does as president, right? Not the legend that he is before, but mostly what he's doing in office. Am I right on that?
I think that's partially true. I mean, part of his military career, we also have to keep in mind, was he fought several battles against numerous different Native American tribes.
Oh,
And I mean, he's not the only one, obviously, that's saying that. But I mean, a big part of his military career before and after the War of 1812 was fighting various Indian tribes throughout the southeastern part of the United States. So I mean, you know, he single-handedly, him and his men slaughter hundreds, thousands of Indians in these battles, right? And he after one of these battles, he adopts an orphaned Indian kid there, and you know, he points to that later on in his career, saying, "Look, I care about these people. I care about them, and I do the." But he neglects to mention that he just literally got done killing their parents, but then he adopts them. So I mean, even before he's president, he does have this like, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the right word. I don't know if it's hatred. It's something. He certainly
yeah.
disregard. Certainly has a disregard for Native people. That's
Well,
for sure.
and even beyond Native people, he really feels entitled to American dominance on the continent. So
Sure.
he's fighting the British. He takes over Florida from the
Mhm.
Spanish. And like you said, there's probably a lot of legality issues that he just blew over with that
Totally.
move. And then he's also attacking any Native American tribes that seem to be in his way.
Yeah.
Anybody who's blocking his way to the land that he feels we as a nation or he as a person should be able to control.
Well, and that would be, and that leads into him being president then, right? So when he's ultimately elected president in 1828, um, he pushes I mean, presidents before him favored Indian removal too,
Yeah.
but he's the one that most forcefully makes sure that it gets done. It's under his urging that the Indian Removal Act in 1830 gets passed.
Yeah.
It's really under that authority, the Indian Removal Act, which is passed by Congress with the support of Andrew Jackson, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's really what starts to lead to sort of this full-scale push to move Native people from the east west of the Mississippi River.
Yeah. And
And
there,
that's the part there that you really have to say, man, that's, we can look back on that today and say, man, that just was not right at all.
yeah, it
You
wasn't.
know?
And I lived for 9 years in Waynesville, North Carolina. So
Mm-hmm.
that's about 40 minutes away from the Cherokee Reservation that's there
Yep.
today.
Mm-hmm.
The Trail of Tears is something that was brought up all the time.
Yeah.
The Cherokee had made lasting ties and relationships. They got along peacefully for the most
Yep.
part with the
Yep.
settlers in that area. There hadn't been fighting for a long time.
No, not at all.
Nothing going on in that area when Andrew
No.
Jackson said they got to get out of here.
Yeah. No, the
And
Cherokee.
after they left,
Yeah.
that land where they were living, it's mountainous. I mean, you can't farm that land. The only way you can live there today is if you're going there on vacation or you've got some kind of business that you do somewhere else. It's still just
Yeah.
small towns, little tiny roads.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 1800s, this was not prime farm territory. This
No.
was not land that was needed by anybody else. It was left largely vacant. Nobody
Yeah.
took over it, and they forced the Cherokee out anyway.
Yeah,
It
they
was
did.
still
I think
labor.
it was gold discovered. I think maybe some gold was discovered there, or something is the impetus to do this. I think that was maybe
Yeah,
their.
yeah,
But
and
yeah,
that's
like you said, even after they kicked them out, it's not like there was this rush of people that moved into that
no,
immediate land.
no. The amount of gold and stones that are found there are pretty minimal. I mean, you can go there today. There's a couple places on the way to Cherokee where you can
Hmm.
go pan for gold.
Yeah.
And I took my kids there. They each found like a sapphire and a ruby. Lots of those kinds of stones are there,
Hmm.
but they're small. And until they're cut professionally, they're really not worth much.
Yeah.
So even at that time, way back in the 1800s, I mean, nobody really got rich off of that
No.
territory.
No.
It,
Well, I think yeah, and I think that
why?
yeah, and I think the Cherokee probably out of all, and there are lots of groups that get kicked out as the
Yeah,
thing you do like, but the Cherokee are the most tragic example because, like you said, they had been living there peacefully. They had interacted. A lot of them had assimilated in many respects,
yeah,
and and to me, and this is maybe outside of the Trail of Tears because that is a direct result of Andrew Jackson. There's no question about that. I think the other thing that really irks me about Jackson is that the Cherokee sue the federal government to stay on their land. They sue and they say, "Hey, you've signed treaties with us. You've said we have a right to stay here." It goes all the way to the Supreme Court. John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, sides with the Cherokee, and they say, "You know what, Cherokee? You have a right to stay on your land. You are correct. You have a right to stay there." Andrew Jackson hears the Supreme Court decision and he just disregards it. He says, Chief Justice Marshall has made his decision, let him enforce it. You know, completely just disregards it. And,
holy
you
cow.
know, even if you say, well, that the Trail of Tears wasn't that bad, if you even want to go down that road, Jackson clearly just disregards the Constitution in general by doing that.
Yeah,
He completely disregards an entire other branch of government.
yeah,
To again, he wants to get his thing done, his course of action done, and he doesn't care whether or not what he's doing is even necessarily legal, because clearly what he's doing wasn't legal.
right,
So,
right.
so big knock on Jackson, I think, for all those things there. You know,
Yeah. How do you have a president of the United States that violates the Constitution to such a major degree? And,
exactly.
and he's on our most commonly used currency, the
I know he is.
$20 bill.
I agree. I know he is. I mean, it's just, if you go throughout history and you think of, imagine if Dwight Eisenhower, in the 1950s had not enforced Brown versus Board of Education, had not enforced school desegregation. If you just said,
Oh,
it's not important, it doesn't matter,
yeah,
or, you think about all the other decisions that the Supreme Court has handed down over the years. If presidents just disregarded them, then we have no judicial branch. And
I know.
that's the thing about it. So,
I know it would totally, totally annihilate the power of the judicial branch. And until Jackson is out of office, they really have no power. I
oh,
mean,
no, not at all.
not
No,
at all.
not
They,
at
they
all.
can't do anything with whatever he decides. And this kind of thing makes Trump suddenly look like, oh, he's not that bad, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't think we have any examples like that yet. Whereas,
No.
if the let's say the Supreme Court came in and said you have to release your tax returns, right? Because he's
Right.
getting sued right now and he's fighting against that. And let's say he disregarded that, like say he disobeyed that Supreme. I mean, then we probably maybe be in that kind of territory where the Supreme Court orders the president to
Yeah.
do something and the president doesn't do it. I mean, you could get into those modern day examples or whatever. I mean, that hasn't happened, but
No, nobody else would dare.
right.
Can you imagine the political fallout? And all I could think is because communication in the time of Jackson was limited, not everybody got the information of what was going on when it was going on. I
Yeah.
can't promise that, but I would think that the reason he didn't get impeached or kicked out of office, besides the fact of all of his popularity and legend status is the fact that a lot of Americans just didn't realize what was going on.
I think that's probably true, but I also think that there's a lot of Americans who supported Jackson's policies at that time too.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
it's I
Maybe
think that's
more.
probably also true, sadly.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, again, but we can look back on Jackson from a 2020 perspective. We can look back at 1832 and say, man, that was these were bad things, these were wrong things. And if we're talking about who should be on our currency, right? Should Jackson be on our currency or not? You look at, surely we have other people in our 230, 240-year history that we could put on our money. Like
Yeah.
I tell my students all the time, it's a shame that James Madison is not on currency. This is the guy
Okay.
that wrote the
Author of the
Constitution.
Constitution.
So I'm
So
like,
I'd like to see some women on our currency.
of course. Well, Harriet Tubman's
Yeah,
supposed to replace Jackson.
Harriet Tubman.
She's
You know?
supposed to. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's been announced like
Yeah.
4 years ago that she was going to do this, and I hope that's still going to be. Yeah, we absolutely should have women on our currency.
Yeah. Susan B. Anthony. What
Of
about
course.
Martin Luther King Jr.? I mean, there are
Yeah.
so many people
Right.
that deserve this kind of recognition.
I agree. People that we all as a country, I think, could collectively look to and say, that person did good work. There wouldn't be a lot. I don't think there'd be a whole lot of historical debate, over
Right.
certain people.
Right.
Like Harriet Tubman. Who's going to argue that? I mean, Harriet Tubman's great, right? She freed slaves. She risked her lives to free people out of like slavery. I think
Yeah.
we can all agree that's awesome.
I know, the most famous person who ran the Underground Railroad.
Right.
How could you get better than that?
I
I
agree.
mean,
Yeah.
so there's another side to this whole question, though, about changing the currency. How much
Mhm.
is it actually going to cost? Do you know?
I don't think it would cost that much at all. I mean, the Treasury already prints new money every year anyway,
Uh-huh.
right? So you think about it. I mean, the Treasury prints new money every year. They destroy money every year too.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, you have to like redesign it and everything like that. But I mean, if we're talking about costs of things, the cost of redesigning the $20 bill is so minuscule and tiny in the vast scheme of our federal budget that if that's the excuse you're using to not change the money, then I don't think that's a valid argument.
Okay. And like you said, there's probably not that big of an argument about who to put on it. That argument's already been faced, right? Harriet Tubman is the one.
Treasury Department announced, I think it was 2015 or 2016, that they were going to, and our current Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, you can Google it. I don't know. He said something about it. There being a holdup with it, or I don't know.
Something. Yeah.
I'm not sure what the holdup
You got to wonder what the holdup is. How many people are going to fight this? It's tradition. We got to keep Jackson there.
Yeah, but my guess, Priscilla, if you went on the street and asked a random person who's on the $20 bill,
they probably couldn't even tell you.
I bet most people couldn't tell you who was on the 10. I bet people could tell you who's on a $1 bill and a $5 bill. But if you said, hey, did you know Alexander Hamilton's on the 10? I'm like, oh, Hamilton, the guy in the musical. Or, do you know Andrew Jackson's on the 20? And I bet a lot of people would say, who's that?
Yeah, it's true.
I would guess. Maybe not, So
I don't know. So
but still,
maybe it's not worth the headache to other people. I think for historians, this is an issue.
for us to think about it, I think it's a great way for us to think though about how do we remember and honor people, or commemorate people, right, in our history. And when you put somebody on currency, what you're really saying is we're honoring and commemorating this person as really important,
Mm-hmm.
and as somebody that we want to sort of collectively look to, right?
And somebody that you're going to get reminded of every single day.
Right.
So it's not the same as like just making a statue or just having a library. It's something that's a continuous reminder.
Right.
Even if it's in your subconscious and you don't
Right.
really think about who's on the money.
And I also tell my students this: if you look at the other bills that are in circulation, Washington's on the 1, Lincoln's on the 5, Hamilton's on the 10, Grant's on the 50, Franklin's on the 100, right? Those are like the main bills.
Mm-hmm.
None of those people I just listed are really controversial.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can have your qualms about Washington back and forth, whatever, but the guy is fundamentally important to the foundation of America, period.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Founder.
Abraham Lincoln was awesome. I will debate anybody that ever tells me differently, right? Alexander Hamilton was the first Treasury Secretary. He set up our national currency system. Fine. Ulysses S. Grant, general in the Civil War. He was a president during Reconstruction that got really important constitutional amendments through. I'm fine
My
with that.
son's
Benjamin
my
Franklin.
favorite president.
Yeah,
So,
Benjamin Franklin, not a president, but like, he's, often kids think he is, but, huge contributions to not just American history, but world history, right? I think
well,
all those people you could say, sure. But Jackson,
yeah.
you look back on that and you're like, huh, you
Hmm.
know.
There
So
are people who say, well, the whole Battle of 1812, just, why do we even need it? Battle of New Orleans shouldn't even have been fought. Treaty was signed.
there's
No?
there might be a legitimate
Mhm.
argument for that. So
Yeah.
how much of a war hero is he fighting a battle that didn't need to be fought? It's not like it's Yorktown, right? You
Right.
know,
Right.
Yorktown had to be won to end the war. The Battle of New Orleans probably didn't need to be fought to win the war because the treaty had already been signed.
Right.
So there you
Right.
go.
All right. Well, I hope this
Cool.
helped some of my students, and
Yeah.
you can take some of the thoughts from our video conversation, watch that the video link that's already there, read the textbook, think it through. Hopefully this will help you. And I wrote down notes as we were discussing, probably not as
Cool.
good notes as you guys could if you watch this and take notes, but I think there's something to be said about Jackson. Hopefully you can make your own opinion.
There you go.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right. We'll see you later.
We'll see you
Bye.
later.
Okay.
Bye.